As Jews, we do not give ourselves enough credit. Take Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu has a dream, and he lays his head down on the stones, and he dreams that there's a sulam mutzav arza, a ladder that is planted firmly on the ground. V'roishoi magia hashamayma. And the head of the ladder reaches heaven. Yaakov Avinu, who represents all Jews, while our feet are firmly planted on the ground, our aspirations, our dreams, our abilities, roishoi magia hashamayma. We can reach heaven. Sometimes we forget how great we are, and we need someone to remind us about it. The following story is not well known at all, and it was told over by Rav Lugassi, who wrote it in his sefer called Yishuv Hadas. And on the last page of the sefer, he tells the following story. He says that there's a Yid who lives in Kiryat Sefer, a neighbor of his. And this Yid tells him about 25 years ago, he says, you know, something happened to me recently and I want to share it with you. As you know, as a young boy, as a young man, I survived the war. A priest saved my life. And I was always very much makar tov. I had tremendous gratitude to this priest because he saved my life. Without him, I wouldn't be here. He was Michasidei Umma Yisrael. He was an extremely righteous Gentile. He was someone who was kind and giving, and he risked his life to save mine. In fact, he comes to visit me in Israel every once in a while. The priest picks himself up, he's an old man, and he visits me. And recently, on one of his visits, he says, I have a special request. And he hands me an envelope, and I open the envelope, and I begin to read it, and I nearly fainted. It was a request of his, a last request of his. He says, you know, I'm getting to be much, much older, and I'm going to die soon. I have a request. I love the Jewish people. I want to be buried next to a Jew. Can you please arrange that? And I looked at him. I'm a member of the Chevra Kadisha. I know the rules. We're not allowed to be buried next to people that are not Jewish. And I didn't know what to tell him. But I figured I'll tell him the truth. I'll tell it to him straight. And I said, as much as I care for you, as much appreciation as I have for you, I can't bend the rules. But you know what? I'm going to ask a rabbi. I went to Rabbi Yechiel, and I asked him what to do, and he said, there's nothing to talk about. There is no Eitzah. He can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. A few months later, he came back, and he says to me the following, you know, I can't stop thinking about it. And I have an idea. You don't have to bury my body next to a Jew. What if they cremate me? I just want my ashes to be sprinkled next to a Jewish person who's buried in the cemetery. He says, I was very moved by the request, and I went back to Rabbi Yechiel, and Rabbi Yechiel smiled. And he said, I'm sorry. It can't happen. It's against halacha. You have to tell him no. And I went back. I was very sad, and I felt terrible. But I told him, the Jewish law is the Jewish law, and he understood, and he was very gracious about it. But Rabbi Yechiel told me one thing that I'll never forget. He said, look at that. Here's a non-Jew, a priest, who so much appreciates, so much values the Jewish people, that he wants his last request to be that he's buried next to a Jew. He'll even have his ashes buried next to a dead Jew. And here we are, each and every one of us, we are alive. We can live as Jews. What a privilege. Don't take it for granted.